Hey guys, what's up man 945 here. Welcome back to another video. Ah, creepy. In today's video I am going to be discussing my thoughts on Andor season 2, which I finished binging tonight. I started binging it yesterday and I finished it today. Um I wanted to wait till all the episodes are out because it wasn't really something I was interested in watching weekly. Although I'm not completely sure on this, but from the vibe I've been getting and from like kind of discourse I've seen talked about it, it seems to me that it was like released in 3 episode increments. I could be. I'm gonna look that up. Was Andor released in 3 episodes? Months. Ah, okay. That is very interesting. That's very different than how they've done it before. That's an interesting idea. Huh, that is a very interesting idea. I didn't know they did that. Huh, that definitely gives me a lot of thoughts, I guess, about that idea, which I hadn't had before. Anyway, that's not really related to the overall quality of the show. So, um, I'm just gonna cut straight to the chase. This is not gonna be like a difference of opinion, um, compared to any other channel you might have seen cover Andor season 2 because it was fucking fantastic. Um, it was just fan fucking tastic. This is fucking fantastic Star Wars is what Andor season 2 is. Now, for some context, because I never did a proper video talking about Andor season 1. I think the most that I ever did regarding that was just a movies and shows tier list, but that would be um drastically outdated by this point. Because I believe that was like that was like 2 years ago, I believe. So even if it's not that long, it's quite outdated in any case. Maybe a year ago. I can't exactly remember, but it's been a long time regardless. And even then, I don't think I went into very much detail about my kind of thoughts on the first season. Nor am I going to do so here because this is a review of season 2. But for some context, I enjoyed the first season. I thought it was pretty solid, but I do think it was bogged down by some pacing issues, and there were some points where certain character perspectives seemed to feel like pointless tangents. But everything about like exploring the raw grittiness of how the rebellion is actually formed, kind of the internal politics of the Imperials was also really interesting. And kind of seeing those different like conflicting morals and everything like that. Those were all the best aspects of season 1, and I am very, very happy to say that season 2 only improved on that formula by a massive magnitude because it massively cleaned up the pacing. And in fact, there was only one real part that really felt to me like a kind of pointless side tangent that didn't really contribute much to the overall plot, which was when Cassian was trapped by that on Yavin 4, I believe, in the beginning. I did that part was felt like a very big drag and a waste of time. But beyond that part, which let's be honest, it didn't really last that long, and so it wasn't actually that much of an impediment on the pacing. It was just that one bit which felt like a bit of a drag and kind of a waste of time. But considering that was the only example like that, I think that season two is, in my opinion, was already off to a much better start from that point onward. But not only did it fix those slight issues that I had with season one of Andor, what this season did even better is it took every single good thing about season one and improved on it exponentially. Um, you're introduced to more characters in the ISB, and as such you get a greater idea of the imperial politics that are going on in one of its agencies. You start to see different supervisors kind of assigned to different assignments, and as such having the different levels of information, and as such it very drastically changes the kind of power dynamics that are that exist in that space, and it makes for such an interesting environment seeing these characters interact because of these like varying level, because of the expertly created tension by the kind of varying levels of power and information and dynamics that they all seem to possess, and it creates a fascinating and thrilling dynamic between all of the Imperials and that sense of competition that is there. Um, and in particular, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna like exactly cover specific characters in a whole list. I'm gonna kind of get to them as we move through the particular sections. But one quick note I will say is that Ben Mendelsohn reprises his role as director Krennic in this season, and once again, absolutely smashing performance as director Krennic. Just top tier performance. Ben Mendelsohn is an excellent actor, and he knows how to play this character with this air of authority and power in a real way, in a difference to Rogue One. Because, and I know this because I also rewatched Rogue One, and I finished it just a few minutes ago. Compared to Rogue One, I think that Ben Mendelsohn in this particular performance as Krennic, even more so because of the fact that this is like a different stage of the plan, he's really able to use that same extreme level of emotion and variance between like quiet and sudden power and intensity in the way that he delivers his lines. Even the variance in a certain sentence, the delivery is incredible, but the way that he's able to kind of project that image with a much larger air of authority due to the fact that this is covering a time period when he was a lot more in control and when he was much more advancing up the imperial political chain. It's very interesting to kind of like note the subtle differences in his performance, and I think it's just brilliant the kind of subtle differences that he brought to this specific portrayal of Krennic. And Krennic is not in the season much, but he really makes his impact felt. And it is just a brilliant performance by Ben Mendelsohn. Um, um, and Thinking of characters that really developed, Dedra Muro from the first season was quite a compelling antagonist. Because he is essentially the main focal point through which we see um the kind of imperial politics that are internal politics that are playing out. And kind of seeing her be thrust into this position with the Gorman Project, and kind of have this like secret air of authority while actually being careful to hide it and not project it was fascinating. And it was really, really interesting to see like her reaction and cover ups versus other parts of the ISB. But what made Dedra's character especially interesting in season two is I don't really remember this being a thing in the first season, and that might be because it's been a long time since I watched it. Like I have not rewatched Andor season one since it came out. Um, and in fact, I just watched a YouTube recap before I started season two just to make sure I remember everything that happened. But that also, when you do that, it doesn't really mean you remember everything about the characters, and um, either it's something that happened off screen, or I completely misremember this part of season two or season one. But Gedra and Cyril Karn were are in a relationship, and I think this is one of the most brilliant decisions made across this entire season because what this dynamic allows, it creates a lot of really, really unique dynamic in this season. Not only do romantically Cyril and Degra have great chemistry, and they clearly care for each other, even if it's a kind of messed up relationship. Um, I think that kind of just their dynamic is really, really interesting as well, and they have fantastic chemistry. So there's that first off. Um, then second, they do a fascinating job kind of exploring this new level of emotion to Dedra's character in which um comparatively in season one she seemed much more ruthless and not nearly as caring or considerate of any other people. But then you have this relationship with Cyril, which presents a fascinating dynamic, in which he kind of um is forced to kind of put up two fronts. Which has her true self at her home with Cyril, where he can kind of be more vulnerable versus her professional side when she's doing her job. And I think that contrast in Dedra's character is fascinating. And after Cyril Karn's death, um which was brilliantly handled by the way, um I think that the way that that affects Dedra's character and the way that that kind of further leads to her breakdown and loss of power is just brilliant. um, Now, Hero Karn, I'll be honest, I wasn't really the biggest fan of him from season one. I thought he was kind of annoying a lot of the time. And I'll be honest, I thought he was kind of overused a little bit as a character. I kind of wished he was in the season less. But I think they did it much better this time around. He's a lot less annoying, and and I do think a part of that is because it's brilliant writing because of his dynamic with Vedra. I think that really changes him for the better. Kind of makes him a more confident person. Um, Makes him more ambitious and um kind of motivated to do different things rather than kind of being always sighted on revenge or one goal. He kind of learns how to cooperate with a team more, and it's really interesting to see that dynamic as well as his like interactions with the Imperial body because he's like an Imperial employee, even though he doesn't really work for any of the major Imperial like agencies necessarily. So kind of seeing how his role fit into that actually, and how he kind of led an office of people that were supposedly Imperial employees, but at the same time weren't really connected to any of the other major functions of the Empire as we would think of it. It was a really very, very interesting perspective, I think, into a different part of the imperial structure that we had never gotten to see before. And I think the opportunity taken there was very interesting. I really, really liked the particular direction, and how that kind of reflected Cyril Karn's character development. Um, Now, moving on to the big one, I'm gonna save my favorite character for last, but moving on to the big guy himself, Andor. Andor's development in this season was absolutely exquisite. Um, he, whereas like the first season was kind of him learning to care about an ideal and kind of become passionate in the rebel cause and learn to believe in something other than just saving his own skin. This season, what I love is it kind of goes back toward the opposite end a little bit. Not to the point where he like stops believing in the rebel cause. That, but no, 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 no. But what I'm referring to is the kind of thing about um how he he kind of is like readily accepting these missions, but then as the season continues, this kind of acceptance he becomes more hesitant to do these things, and there's a lot more caution and reservedness shown in the actions that he takes when he's considering like his life with Bix, for example. And also, side note, Bix and Cassian in this season, they have fantastic chemistry. This is a relationship that I love seeing. It's very satisfying. Both the characters really feel like they are made for each other, and both of them feel like they can solve the other's flaws in a fantastic way. And of course, with Bix, they gave her the good old fashioned PTSD route, which, in my opinion, is a trope that can never really go wrong when you need a source of a character development for a particular character that is a little bit more on the sidelines by comparison. I think the way that that was handled was amazing with Bix's character. Um, Now moving on to who has quickly become like if my favorite character didn't exist in this show, then Mon Mothma definitely would be my favorite, and Mon Mothma takes an easy second place for me in terms of characters in this show because um I loved being able to kind of like in the first season we got a deeper view into this kind of lens of Senate politics, but in a much more unique way in terms of the fact that it is under the Empire and is way different than the Galactic Senate of the Republic, for example. Um and kind of like seeing Mon Mothma's just interaction with these things um it was really really interesting perspective once again, and I think that's honestly one of my favorite things about this season is the fact that there were so many opportunities purposely made to explore different perspectives that we hadn't seen before while advancing the story, which I really, really enjoyed. Now this one was not exactly a new perspective because we did kind of delve into this in the first season, but comparatively, there is a lot more of it done here. And in comparison to season one, it feels like it's done on a lot more personal level because of the fact that a good portion of the early episodes are exploring a traditional Pendulum wedding and kind of um Mon Mothma interacting with all of the guests at the party um and kind of partaking in the festivities and such, while also carefully balancing her investments in the rebel cause and kind of making sure her tracks are covered by the actions that she's taking and manipulating political deals to kind of go her way and also further support the cause. Um, and in my opinion, possibly the most powerful like scene in the entire season for me is when Mon Mothma at the wedding just decides at a certain point to say fuck it all and just kind of starts drinking and like crazy and just starts absolutely getting into the dancing and just like going like full no caution route with like just the intense partying. um and the reason that that is such a powerful scene is because it's very multi-layered because you have you there's the first layer which I think can really be interpreted as like her being her kind of release from the stress of her work and kind of her political dealing and financial dealings. But then there is the second layer, the much, much deeper layer, in my opinion, um, where you have this idea of her being, how do I describe it? Um, in the scene before she walks her daughter out, she shares an anecdote about how her mother was drunk, and after that conversation where Mon essentially tries to convince her daughter not to go through with it, um, her daughter says a line it would just make anyone feel horrible, and she's just like, "I wish you were drunk," implying that she wished she didn't have to hear that whole thing. And so when you consider that context for when Mon Mothma becomes crazy drunk, it adds a lot more power to the emotions that she is feeling in that particular scene. Um, and just the way that all of that was executed was fantastic, in my opinion. Um, Now, by far, in my opinion, and this was like exponentially overly affirmed over and over again with every moment that he had in the second season. My favorite character in Andor is Luthen. Like, not even close. Um, because I think that he is such an interesting character introduced in season one, and it kind of and this season only explored more and more of his fascinating morality, and in this sense we got a much deeper insight into a particular set of his values because we got to see we got a much deeper look at his relationship with his assistant Clea, who essentially is a lot more than that. Not just an assistant. Basically, they're like father and daughter, essentially. As we see with the backstory in um episode 10. Um and I really, really liked their relationship as well. It was very, very interesting in kind of how Clea was this sort of need to be like this constant shield to prevent him from doing a bunch of stupid things and not really thinking things through and making sure that he was actually doing things for the proper reasons. And I think that that balance was just absolutely fantastically done. Um, and yeah, just Luthen the entire season with his extremely complicated morals and the way that he's just seems to be willingly sacrificing everyone and everything for this one cause. And he knows it's a personal flaw. Like that's a thing I love, and it's something that's done so well with Luthen's character. Is I love when characters know that they have their own flaws and just do nothing about it. I think that it's such an interesting way of writing a character. I think Luthen is a masterclass example of that. And this is this is so much better accentuated by the fact that Stellan Skarsgård gives a absolutely brilliant performance as Luthen. One of the best performances I've seen in live action TV in quite a while. Certainly, I would say among the best of any Star Wars TV show in terms of single character performances. Um, Absolutely incredible, and in fact, it rivals Andy Serkis's character for my favorite um performance across the entire show because that one was my favorite of season one. Um, but him the entire season was just fucking brilliant. And to kind of end off this video, I am going to kind of go on a bit of a rant. So if you're not really interested in this part of the video and you only came to hear my thoughts on Andor, then this is your cue to leave if you don't really care about my further ranting on Star Wars, which I totally understand. But rant beginning now. Why can't this be what we get every time with Star Wars? I don't understand. Like, I truly, I do not understand. Like, what is going on with Star Wars? And when I say I don't understand what's going on, what I don't understand is how Andor season two and the Acolyte will both be shows that exist. Like, there's a lot of people, and I would say this is a fair argument based on how good Andor season two was. That Tony Gilroy is just a brilliant director and writer, and he knows how to make a good show. That's a very fair argument, and to be honest, if that was your main answer to my question, um, I would take that as a very acceptable answer. Um, but the only counter I would have to that answer, and it's something to do with Tony Gilroy himself. It's Kathleen Kennedy herself, because that's the main thing I'm questioning as to what is going on. Because it just does not make sense to me that the person in head of Star Wars would have made the go ahead to produce Rise of Skywalker and let the Acolyte exist as a show, but also be totally behind the creative vision for Rogue One and Andor and The Mandalorian seasons one and two. Um, it does not make any sense to me. Like I don't understand why Andor season two can't be what we get every time. It doesn't even have to be as good as Andor season two. It doesn't even have to be nearly as close as good. It just needs to be good. It needs to make sense. It needs to have a decent amount of episodes. It needs to not have like 6 episodes like Kenobi that some of them were barely even 45 minutes. It needs to have like not shitty writing and just an absolute waste on the on with and these massive budgets that seem like they're just made to go nowhere, and there's just absolutely no writing involved because there clearly can be fantastic writing. I've just spent the last 30 minutes yapping about it when it comes to Andor season 2. There can be fucking brilliant writing when it comes to Star Wars. So why is it not a consistently delivered product? I do not understand. Why do we have such brilliant writing in Andor, and yet for some reason there's such shitty writing in shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mando season 3 and The Acolyte most recently? I do not understand. Like, why? What is going on with Star Wars? I do not understand how those two things can exist, and it baffles me, and by extension makes me fucking furious as to why Andor season 2 cannot be the standard for which all Star Wars content can be based off of. I do not understand it. I really don't. Um, that I felt like I really released a lot of pent up energy there. Um, but to kind of wrap this up, the main point. Andor season 2 was fucking fantastic and has slightly renewed my hope in seeing something good from Star Wars in the future, because I thought I'd lost all faith completely after the Acolyte was such a fucking shit stain. Um, but then, um, but then, this show was so, this season was so fucking fantastic that, I can't help but have my hope redeemed a little bit, even if it might be against certain parts of my better judgment. Um, yeah, if you have not watched season 2 of Andor yet, do it. It's fucking fantastic. Although I don't know why you would have watched it if you just watched this video, because I kind of spoiled everything. But that's what I normally do in my videos. So, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.